If you open up your Politics 101 instructional manual to the chapter called How to Not Fall for the Oldest Tricks in the Book, you will find there a line that reads, when your opponent is baiting you to do something, at least consider not taking that bait. Today, with one hastily called afternoon press conference, Republicans in Congress flunked that portion of Politics 101. First of all, here was the bait.
The critics tend to criticize, but they don't offer an alternative budget.
A bunch of the critics out there, I've already said, show me your budget. Show me what you want to do. And I'm happy to have that debate.
I dare you. I double dog dare you. Go on. Do it. Republicans, forgetting all the lessons of how to succeed in politics and the things that most people learn on elementary school playgrounds, chose to respond by doing exactly what the president was daring them to do.
2 nights ago, the president said, "We haven't seen a budget yet out of Republicans." Well, it's just not true, because here it is, Mr. President.
And with those words, the bait was officially swallowed, and congressional Republicans found themselves officially on the proverbial hook. Last week on this show, you might remember we hosted Lawrence O'Donnell, a veteran of the Senate Finance Committee staff. I asked Lawrence if he thought that Republicans would take the bait and propose their own budget. His analysis was no way. They'd never be that dumb.
The normal minority tactic, which you see Mitch McConnell basically saying he's going to do, is to try to pick apart the budget that the president offers and that the Democrats bring to a vote in the Senate. And that tactically is normally the way to go. Because if the Republicans were to come up with their own budget, just as an example, there would probably be zero beside the words health care reform. And so they would set themselves up for being criticized.
Right, that's the strategy here, unless you are really, really, really confident that you can compete on policy, that when people compare the concrete things you're proposing with the concrete things that the party in power is having to propose, because they're actually responsible for having to govern the country, unless you're really sure that your ideas will look better in comparison, maybe just lie low. Get your own act together before you put anything out there to be criticized. That's the advantage of being in the minority, and that's strategy 101. But today, Republicans decided they just couldn't resist the dare. They released an 18-page budget entitled The Republican Road to Recovery. It is their counterproposal to the president's budget, where President Obama's budget aims to tackle that whole weaning ourselves off of oil thing, moving toward renewable energy. The Republican counterproposal is, quote, Republicans support immediately leasing oil and gas resources in the outer continental shelf through an expedited and streamlined procedure. In other words,
let me make it very clear. Drill, baby, drill, and drill now.
You'll remember how awesome that worked out for President McCain and Vice President Palin. On the economic crisis and the government's response to all these industries failing and the financial sector collapsing, Republicans say, quote, the Republican budget ends this failed bailout strategy by refusing to assume additional spending for bailouts. Now, that, might actually get them some political traction. There is so much outrage about the bailouts. If the Republicans just defined themselves full stop as against all bailouts no matter what, that might have a political impact. If they were just full-on, rock-ribbed, I shall not be moved against the whole bailout thing, it might work. Right, Congressman Boehner?
As a party, are you going to continue to oppose any more bailout money?
We'll see.
We'll see. Way to stand by those principles. The single most detailed, concrete commitment in the Republican budget proposal is actually about taxes. They say, quote, Republicans propose a simple and fair tax code with a marginal tax rate for income up to $100,000 of 10% and 25% for any income thereafter. What does that mean? It means the top tax bracket gets cut to 25%. In other words, their big concrete idea, the only idea in their supposed budget with an actual number on it, is a massive tax cut for rich people. You thought the Bush tax cuts were good for the richest people in the country? Bush set the highest tax rate at 35%. The Republicans want to drop that another 10 points. They want to triple down on what Bush did to the deficit and the economy. triple-down economics. Wow. So recapping here, A, the Republicans totally took the bait in proposing an alternative budget. B, their bait-taking let us see their plan in all of its glory, i.e. biggest tax cut for the rich ever. And C, they're not even done yet.
Today, we're offering our blueprint for where we believe we can help grow our economy again. And you'll see the details of the budget portion of this next week.
Next week? Oh, please, oh, please, oh, please, oh, please, oh, please. More details coming. Republican Congressman Paul Ryan will reportedly present more details next Wednesday. And so we officially unveil, with bated breath, see that down there? Our Rachel Maddow show, Show Us Your Republican Budget Countdown Clock. Yay. Joining us now is Ryan Grimm, senior congressional correspondent for the Huffington Post. He was in attendance at the Republican Party's budget unveiling today. Ryan, thanks very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Ryan, are there actually any spelled out specific, numerically specific policies in the plan other than the big tax cut for the wealthiest people in the country?
You know, there aren't. And the budgets were waiting for us when we got into the room. They're underneath our desks, and reporters were pulling them out and looking through them, and as you scan through it, you're looking for numbers. Every time you got to a number, when you read the context around it, it was attacking some Democratic plan. So it was only when you got to the tax cuts that that was their actual solution.
So once reporters had gone through it, and I have to say, when I got it today, when I printed out the PDF, I did exactly the same thing. I was going through it trying to find, deficit projections, thinking that's how they were going to sell it. And that stuff just isn't there, and it'll probably happen next week. But after reporters had done that, what was the reaction? How did the rollout go? How did reporters question them today at this press conference?
Well, first they delayed the press conference for about a half an hour, which annoyed the reporters. But then once they saw what they had come for, there was Capitol Hill press corps is a pretty staid bunch, but it was a pretty hostile reaction to this thing. They were peppering Boehner with questions like, well, what about deficit projections? Are you going to cut the deficit? If so, how are you going to do it? What are you going to cut in general? How are you going to do it? And Boehner just kept saying, next week, we'll give you more details next week. And the press corps was kind of like, what are we doing here? And this was the conservative media, the liberal media, everybody there was like, what is this? What's going on here?
Ryan, there has been some reporting today that there may be some evident dissent among Republican leaders about whether or not this rollout was a good idea today, whether or not this whole plan is a good idea. Did it seem like a united front in person to you? I understand that Eric Cantor left and wouldn't take questions right after he made his initial remarks.
Well, he left, and his office tells me that he had to go down to the floor to make this the end of the week speech with Steny Hoyer. But actually, while I was waiting to come on, I was flipping through the budget proposal again. It's a thin little thing, so I figured, I've got a few minutes. I looked on the first page, and actually Representative Paul Ryan, who is writing the entire budget, which he says he's going to release on Wednesday, did not sign the document. It's signed by 10 Republicans, including all of the leadership, except for Paul Ryan. They know where his office is. They know where he is. The fact that he's not on there is interesting.
Another sign of dissent may be that questioning that we showed of John Boehner as he was trying to get out of the room today, essentially refusing to sign on to this commitment to zero further bailouts. I mean, that is in the document they released today, and he is one of the people who signed it. What do you make of that unwillingness to commit to what he had signed on to?
That was bizarre because they have voted against the bailouts in the past. Their votes aren't needed to pass the bailouts. The politically popular thing to do is to oppose the bailouts. So why he didn't just come out and say, yes, that's right, no more bailouts, is anybody's guess. There's also a very interesting section about halfway through this budget where they decry socializing losses while privatizing gain. Now, you might think this is written by Noam Chomsky, but then the next line says, the problem with that is that the gains might end up being privatized, and then, therefore, Americans would no longer be free to profit. So it's an interesting document. I recommend giving it a read.
Ryan, one last quick question. It's sort of an analysis point, I guess. Up until today, it seems to me like President Obama has been defending himself from attacks on his budget from fellow Democrats, the conservative Democrats and Democrats like Senator Kent Conrad in North Dakota. Doesn't it sort of seem like the Republicans have done Obama a huge favor today by putting themselves out there as the opposition rather than his own party?
Yeah. I was speaking to a House Republican aide the other day, and I said, do you want to make any comment about this Obama budget? And he said, you know what? Kent Conrad's doing our job for us. We're just going to step aside. They should have taken his advice. Just a couple days later, then, they take Obama's bait. They come out with their own proposal. And while Conrad and the White House might be going after each other, they get in the middle and they get punched. Now, Conrad and Obama are both united in just abusing this, because when they finally do present their budget, it's going to look awfully strange because their tax cuts have eviscerated the revenue that the government takes in. So what is there left to fund? They're going to have to eliminate almost everything.
Why do you think I got that countdown clock down in the corner of the screen? Ryan Grimm, senior congressional correspondent for Huffington Post. It's nice to have you on the show. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.